Hey guys, it's Isaac over here at All-in-One Auto Detail Shop in Greenwood, Indiana. And today we have this Honda Civic, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to restore your headlight lenses and get them back to as close to new as possible without having to replace the entire headlight assembly. So as you can see, we're going to get up close here. These headlights are very heavily oxidized. It's super rough. You can actually hear my fingers rubbing on them. And so all this cloudiness and fogginess, as you can see, both sets are really like that. This driver's side one is a lot worse, but we're gonna get into that right now. I'm gonna show you an easy way of doing this that you can probably do at home. And I'm also gonna show you the professional and the only permanent way to actually restore your headlights. So let's get to it. What I've seen people use on headlights to restore them is toothpaste. I've seen people use WD-40. I've even seen people use IPA, which is isopropyl alcohol. And basically, it's the same process with each of these products. You put a little bit on your rag, you wipe it on, you really buff it in there. You let it sit for a little bit, and you come in with something else, whether it be a pressure washer or a water-coated rag, and you just wipe that stuff off. You know, you'll see a lot of these videos online of people talking about them and how much they help, but really what that is, it's a temporary fix. You know, the toothpaste or WD-40, it might clear it up temporarily, and that's just because the toothpaste, for instance, will fill in a lot of these scratches and everywhere where the lens is imperfect. And then as water hits it, it rains or whatever else, you go through a car wash, that is going to come off and it's going to be right back to how it was. So our at-home remedies, while they do work temporarily, they're not going to be permanent by any means. You know, they might last a couple of days. The cloudiness is going to come back and you're going to have to do it all over again. So that's why you bring it to a professional and let us do it. So I'm going to take you through the steps that we take at our shop to restore your headlights and get them back to new. First things first, since we are doing some sanding with sandpaper and some wet sanding, we're gonna wanna tape off these painted edges here. So I went ahead and popped the hood just so that we had a little bit easier of a time putting tape around this headlight. You don't have to put any up here, since anything up here you can't hurt with sandpaper and whatnot. Or at least you can't correct after the fact. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm going to take this painter's tape and run it around this entire headlight so that we have a little bit of a buffer zone when we are doing our buffing. Let's go ahead and do that. Gonna run it all the way along every edge. And I'm actually gonna double it up as well, just so we have a little bit more protection. So after we're done taping, our next thing is to grab our air sander. This is something that we hook up to our air compressor and it spins around. This is where we're going to be putting our sandpaper on and sanding down this lens. Stuff like this, you can find it on Amazon and we will actually put the links in the bio for you. Any tool or product that we use in this video will be linked in the description below. So if you want to do it for yourself at home, make sure you go check these things out. They're very high quality and this is what we use at a professional shop. So we're gonna find the right sandpaper. What I'm gonna try first is doing some wet sanding rather than going right to dry sandpaper. It's because it takes less steps and we're gonna see if the wet sandpaper can cut through all of this that we need it to and do all the correction that we need without going deeper. Right here, I have 500 grit wet sandpaper. You can see it says 500 on the back. This is a brand new pad here. Now I only use about one pad for every headlight. So for doing the two headlights on this car, I'm gonna be using 2 of everything in here. So with sandpaper, you always start at the highest grit. This is so that you can do the majority of the cutting and then you go to lower grit and buff out those scratches and then eventually you get to buffing and then polishing, and then after our polishing step, we will be done. So we're gonna start at 500 grit, go to 1,000 and then go to 3,000. And then we're gonna be able to see if we need to do any dry sandpaper on this. If not, going right into buffing and polishing. And the only other thing that we need for our wet sanding step is a water solution. So we have here ONR, which is Opti No Rinse. This comes from our Optimum Polymer Industries company that we're partnered with. And it's really just a water-based lubricant, cleaner, and whatnot. So what I'm gonna be doing is spraying this ONR on this headlight casing, and then I'm gonna get to sanding on it with our wet sandpaper. Just gonna get an even coat all the way around here. O&R is very nice because we have to use very little to no product at all. O&R actually mixes at 256 to 1. So 256 part water to 1 part O&R. So if you buy a gallon of this stuff, you can wash your car, you can clean the interior of your car forever without running out of that gallon. So this is a very, very good product. So I just sprayed the headlight with the O&R, and now I spray my sandpaper, and we're just gonna get right to it. We're gonna be sanding the whole lens evenly across, making sure we give every part the same amount of attention as the other, so that we get an even sanding across the whole lens. So we're just gonna start at the top here. And we're gonna be careful around the edges. That's why we put the tape here, but we're still gonna be careful nonetheless. So here we go. I'm just taking my time here, going very slowly. As you can see, I can't quite get into this corner, so I'm gonna leave that corner alone for now and come back and get it at the end. But you can actually see the bad plastics coming out right now, out of the lens. That's this white stuff. That is part of the lens. And what we're really doing with headlight restoration is we are cutting down the bad part of the lenses. Now, not enough to ever make a visible difference, but it's enough to get that nasty stuff off the outside so that we get a clear and perfect brand new part of the lens on the outside afterwards. So let's keep on going here. I'm gonna go back over everything one more time. All right, so as of right now, I have 2 corners that I can't get with my machine, so I'm gonna do those by hand at the end. I'm gonna continue on and do this other part right here. It's gonna be a little bit tougher because we've got some edges here that just aren't flat like the rest of this, but still pretty simple. We're just gonna move our pad sideways a little bit so that we can reach it a little bit easier. So it's super important while doing headlight restoration to make sure that your pad is always spinning. If you give it too much pressure on one side, you see it's not gonna spin, or if it's spinning counterclockwise, it's not really doing as much work. You always want it to spin clockwise with the way that the gun wants to spin. So you see my gun wants to go clockwise, so I gotta make sure that I'm keeping the pad flat so that it can continue spinning clockwise and generating that heat and that friction that's taking away the bad plastic on the lenses. So just always make sure that the pad's always spinning. All right, now that I have gone across this whole headlight lens, I am now going to spray my O&R on here to see what we have left. Just keep in mind that we still have to hand buff this corner, and actually this corner back here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna spray this on here, and we're actually gonna see all this bad plastic just kind of fall off the lens here. And already after just one step, we can see here's getting a little bogged up. We can see just how much correction just one step already did. So that's a cool little visual here. Here's all the bad plastics on the pad. So you can tell that it's doing work. What we're gonna do now, I'm gonna take my pad off of my buffer here, and I'm going to hand polish these couple, or hand sand these couple corners on here. So I just folded my pad in half a little bit just so I can get it a little bit easier to scrub in here. I'm gonna scrub it real good, giving a good amount of pressure one way, and then I'm gonna flip my pad to another side so I get a fresh area and scrub it the other way. All right, now that I have got this all sprayed off with my O&R, I came in with my dry rag and wiped off the rest of the O&R just so we could gauge where we are at. So now we can see which areas maybe need a little bit more with that 500 grit wet sandpaper. For example, over here, there's a little bit clearer right here than it is the rest of the headlight. What that means is I didn't quite cut through here quite enough. So I'm gonna have to re-hit this spot and maybe just a couple other spots that I see on here. So it's good after every grit of sandpaper to go through and dry it off to make sure that everything got evenly cut. And one thing also to keep in mind is restoring headlights is one of those things where you have to trust the process. Yeah, we can look at this one and say, oh wow, this looks like crap after I just did it. How will I ever get it to come out clear? Well, it's just one of those things that you just have to wait for the whole process to be done to see the end result. So, like I said, this one's a lot more foggy than that one over there, but that's just because we're dulling everything down so that we can bring it back up. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna take one more pad of 500 grit wet sandpaper and do a couple of these spots, touch them up, make them all look even, and then we can move on to the next step. Now it is time for our 1000 grit wet sandpaper here. So I'm gonna put this on my tool here, and it's the same process as before. I'm gonna spray my O&R all over this headlight, get a clear, good coating of it. Spray it on my pad here. Like I said, a brand new fresh pad, and just get to it. I'm gonna start at the same spot I started last time. And just hit everything evenly. As we go on, we're not gonna see as much of that headlight residue just sticking on here because we're cutting less and less as we switch pads. So we're still gonna see a little bit, but it's not gonna be nearly as much as was with the 500 grit. Now we have our 3000 grit wet sandpaper, and we're going to be doing it on the headlight lens, just like all the other ones. But first, we're gonna take our O&R and spray off this nasty old plastics. Get a nice, cool visual there. And look, it's becoming more and more clear after every step. So that's what we're working towards. We're working on getting out the scratches of the wet sandpaper into moving into buffing and polishing on this. And we're almost done. So we've got about 3 more steps now. So we're gonna spray my pad here with our O&R, make sure this is all coated very good, and go right back at it. Same process as before. And this time we're gonna see almost no plastic like coming off, and everything's been cut down enough. We're just working out the scratches now. All right. Now we are going to be spraying O&R on this headlight for the last time in this process. Just getting the rest of this plastic residue off. As you can see, there's not nearly as much as with the other steps. And you can see how clear this headlight is starting to get now. So now I'm gonna dry everything off because now we are going to do our buffing, which is our compounding step, and our polishing. This car is from 2011, so it is almost 15 years old, and these headlights have probably never been restored before. And so this is the first time that we're giving these babies some love, and we're gonna make our customer super, super happy today. Just by looking at it right now, we can already tell we got out about 80% of that nastiness that was on here. You could tell just how bad it was at the beginning, and even without doing our buffing and polishing on here, how much better it is. So this next step, our compounding, usually makes the most difference, or at least what you can see, it makes the most difference. Now we are done with our air sander. We're gonna pop that off of our air compressor hose and put on our air polisher. It's the same thing as before. It spins just at lower RPMs. It generates a little bit more heat so we can do a little bit more correction, but it spins a little bit slower. So we're going to now find our compounding pad, slap it on here. This is a purple microfiber pad. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna grab a brush. We're gonna brush this out just so that we get the maximum amount of correction possible. We never want our threads to be all bogged down. We are using Sonax compound. We're using the 6:4 ratio. So we're going to be putting this on here. It's a pretty good cut, Sonax. We use that for a lot of our compounding. We're gonna kind of map out where we're going with our compound. Spread it out a little bit so it's not just splattering everywhere when we start buffing. And now we get right to it. So same thing as before, we're just gonna give every area the same amount of attention as the last so that we can get even correction throughout the whole headlight. Once again, we can't really get in that corner, so we're gonna come back and do that by hand later. I already did the whole headlight. I'm actually going to reactivate my pad and compound the headlight again. The compounding step is super important because we're getting rid of the rest of those sanding marks. So I'm gonna do this whole step twice just to make sure I get the most correction possible. So there we go, put the Sonax compound on here again. Map out my route, rub it in, spread it out, and go yet again. All right, now we are going to take a fresh rag and wipe off all this compound. And as you can see just how clear this headlight is starting to get. We still have one more step after this. So as we're wiping it off, we're kind of checking everything to make sure that everything got done properly. This would be the time, say if you have a corner or something that's not as clear as the rest of the lens, this is where you would go back and do your steps all over in those spots. And you always start at the roughest sandpaper because that's what's cutting the most. And if you miss a spot or a spot is not as clear, it's probably because it didn't get cut as good at the beginning. So this is where you would want to check everything before you do your polish, before you take your tape off and all that good stuff. Now I'm gonna do my polishing step and get rid of the rest of those compounding marks. And then this headlight will be done. It's the same as the compounding step, just making sure that everything gets done evenly and that you just spend your time. Spend your time doing your compounding and polishing step. There's no need to rush it. So here we are using Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Polish. Just gonna put a little bit on our compounding or on our polishing pad here. Boom, just like that. And just like the compound, we're gonna kind of map out where we're going. Rub it in a little bit, and we get right to it. And now we are going to do that step again. Once again, we're doing this twice, just like the compounding step, because this is our last step to correction. And so we want to make sure that everything is done properly. So rubbing it in once again and going right back at it. All right. And that is the polishing, the compounding, and the wet sanding done. So now we're gonna take our buffing rag and wipe off all this polish and see our finished product here. Now this is before we put a headlight coating on here. What a headlight coating does is it helps with UV resistance. It helps from the fading and the cloudiness coming back to your headlights. We use one from Optimum Polymer Industries, the same guys that make our ONR and the same guys who do our ceramic coatings. I'm gonna take off this tape now and clear up around the edges, make sure there's no polish left over and whatnot. Easy as that. I'm gonna give this headlight one more wipe down. That is what it looks like to professionally restore your headlights. Like I was saying before, this is an over 15-year-old car. Your headlights, just over time, this starts to happen. The sun hits them and oxidation hits it and everything just starts to build up on there. It makes it really hard to see at night. Not as much light is passing through. Now we're gonna move on to the passenger headlight. Do the same thing there and we'll be right back. As you can see, both headlights have now been restored completely and look brand new. The steps that we took in this video were exactly what you need to correct your lenses. If you're having trouble seeing at night, if you're tired of the yellowing or the cloudiness on top of your headlights, you need to sand them down, buff, and polish them out and make them look brand new. Stop using toothpaste, stop using WD-40, and any of these other home remedies that you hear about. They're gonna work, but only temporarily until the next wash. So if you wanna do it right, follow the steps in this video. With that being said, if you have any more questions about this process, leave them in the comments below. Drop a like and subscribe to our channel for more tips and tricks from a real detailer to you guys.